Genesis 8, 1-19. But God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the livestock that were with him in the ark. And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided. The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heavens were closed. The rain from the heavens was restrained, and the waters receded from the earth continually. At the end of 150 days, the waters had abated, and in the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat, and the waters continued to abate until the 10th month. In the 10th month, on the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains were seen. At the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. Then he sent forth a dove from him to see if the waters had subsided from the face of the ground. But the dove found no place to set her foot, and she returned to him to the ark, for the waters were still on the face of the whole earth. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. He waited another 7 days, and again he sent forth the dove out of the ark. And the dove came back to him in the evening, and behold, in her mouth was a freshly plucked olive leaf. So Noah knew that the waters had subsided from the earth. Then he waited another 7 days and sent forth the dove, and she did not return to him any more. In the 601st year, in the 1st month, the 1st day of the month, the waters were dried from off the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and looked, and behold, the face of the ground was dry. In the 2nd month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth had dried out. Then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth." So Noah went out, and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives with him. Every beast, every creeping thing, and every bird, everything that moves on the earth, went out by families from the ark.
Thank you, Dot. One of the things that I mentioned last week, and you probably noticed again in the reading today, is that over and over, when God is describing the different events and the different things that happen, he uses these dates on this day and this month and this year, and he just keeps referring back to specific times to give it that authentic place in history. And the other thing that we know or can see that helps us to see that this is genuine, what happened, is that God inspired other writers in the Bible to write about the events of Noah as well. So we've got it sort of set in history, and then we've also got other people writing about it being a real event, cataclysmic, incredible event that took place. So we have writers like Isaiah mentions either Noah, the flood, or the ark, or the animals going in and out, or different amounts of information. We have Isaiah, we have Ezekiel, we obviously have Moses in Genesis, we have Matthew, we have Luke, we have the writer of Hebrews, we have Peter, and also Jesus. And they all refer to it as a real historical event, and we get the dates of when it happens. And there's a little bit of trying to piece the dates all together. There's one main idea, but there's a few sort of smaller ideas that people have about how it all works. But pretty much as a reasonable summary, we're about 5 months in at this point. So he's been around floating in a wooden box, quite possibly for 5 months. A long time. No land in sight. And quite clearly we know the end of the story. We've read it today, well, the end of that little bit of their time in the ark. But Noah didn't. He didn't have a clue how the story ended. You know, quite possibly, at the beginning God said 40 days and 40 nights. He was told that information that the rain would come for that length of time. Quite possibly he thought that was all it was going to be. That was the end of his time in the ark. It would all be over, maybe a week or two more. And yet 5 months have passed. And if chapter 7 is the great destruction, chapter 8 is the start of the great recreation. In Genesis 8 verse 1, the second half, it says, "And God made a wind blow over the earth, and the waters subsided." And the word he uses for a wind, God made a wind, is a Hebrew word ruah. God made a ruah from God blow over the earth. The earth was covered in waters. And we're meant to notice how similar that is to what happened in Genesis 1. The wording is very similar. In Genesis 1 we get, "In the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was without form or void, and darkness was over the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God," the ruah of God, the wind of God, "was hovering over the faces of the waters." Sometimes the word ruah is translated just wind, as in a physical wind. Other times it clearly means the Spirit of God. So we have the Spirit of God fluttering over the waters in Genesis 1, and we have the ruah, the wind of God, starting to change things and bring about the birth, the recreation in Genesis 8. So we're meant to notice that it's similar, but also that it's different. Because God's not restarting from scratch. He's already got a cargo of genes floating around in order to recreate life from, rather than just out of nothing. And something else we're meant to notice is that this is all about God's work. Noah clearly has an important part to play, but he's quite clearly the supporting actor in this play. If there was an award, he wouldn't get the main Oscar, he'd be the supporting player. In Genesis 8 verse 2, we're told, "The fountains of the deep and the windows of the heaven were closed." Well, that wasn't Noah's doing. "And the rain from heaven was restrained." Well, that's again someone else is doing that. "And the waters receded from the earth continually." See, God, not Noah, has decided it's time for the waters to disperse. If it left up to Noah, he probably would have chosen earlier. But God knows best. God closes the flow so the waters recede. One of the Psalms talks about this period and a little bit about what happens during this period. And I just want to read a few verses from Psalm 104 to you. Talking about God, "He set the earth on its foundations so that it should never be moved. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains." Obviously talking about the flood of Genesis 7. "At your rebuke they fled. At the sound of your thunder they took to flight. The mountains rose and the valleys sank down to the place that you'd appointed for them. You set a boundary that they may not pass, so that they might not cover again the earth." So we have a description of what God does at this point in a psalm, telling us what's going on as the waters receded. It says the mountains rose and the valleys sank. So the earth changed in its appearance. With lots of mud and water sloshing around, things changed. Creatures, as we know in the flood, suddenly died, whether it was due to mudslides or water on top of that. And then during the flood, the waters receding, the landscape changing, causing mountains to rise up and seas, valleys to go down. And as the mountains rose, taking some of the fossil carnage to the top of the world. Which is why we find in the Himalayas, one of the highest mountain ranges, fossils of sea creatures in the mountains. The mountains rose up to higher levels, taking with them parts of small animals, even parts of whales, fossilized remains caused by the mud piling up and the water killing off. As the waters receded, the mountains rose and the valleys sank. And then finally, we have the ark hitting dry land. A mountain range in the east of Turkey, the mountains of Ararat. But Noah's ordeal is not over, because most of the world is still underwater. Water everywhere Noah looked. So then more time passes, and we read that Noah sends out a raven, but still no proper land, certainly no vegetation. He waits longer and sends out a dove, still not enough land or vegetation to tempt the dove to settle. And then another week passes and he sends out a dove again, and this time it stays out all day and returns in the evening with a freshly plucked olive leaf. The world is rejuvenating. There's leaf, there's life. Life is returning. So off Noah rushes. Well, actually, no, he doesn't. He waits another 7 days and sends the dove off again. And this time it never returns. So off Noah rushes. No, he doesn't. He's patient. He waits. And he waits. I'm sure he's quite desperate to get off that boat by now. But he still waits. Another 8 weeks passes until we're told that not only the face of the ground was dry, what it says in verse 13, but in verse 14, the earth had dried out. And it's only then at that point that God speaks to Noah again. Remember, Noah was known for doing all that God commanded. Well, God hadn't told Noah to get off, so he stayed. Verse 15, then God said to Noah, go out from the ark, you and your wife and your sons wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing that is with you of all flesh, birds and animals and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth, that they may swarm on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth. So we had Genesis 7:1, go into the ark. Silence. We're not told God speaks again. All this time passes, Noah bobbing around, no land in sight, not knowing the end of the story. Genesis 8:16, go out from the ark. And Noah does all that the Lord commands him. And again, just as a reminder, if we'd forgotten the fact of what was said earlier, there's another reminder that this is like Genesis 1, this is like the beginning. God says to Noah, his wives, his sons' wives, to the birds, the animals, be fruitful and multiply on the earth. A reminder again that this is a new start, not a brand new creation, but a recreation, a restart. I don't know how you imagine Noah coming out of the ark. Often, certainly in pictures I've seen in children's storybooks or in little videos, he's kind of like really excited and he comes out. And I understand that idea, but I think there's plenty of reasons to think he would have been quite nervous, apprehensive, very much aware of God's judgment on the world, as well as excited to get off the boat. I'm pretty sure that a year spent on a boat with only immediate family and in-laws for company would have exposed on some quite regular occasions a bit of tension, possibly, and an awareness of their own sinfulness, even though they escaped God's judgment. And they would have left the ark. There would have been some vegetation around. We know that things would have grown, but not the abundance that they were used to. The world would seem familiar, but also different. Different mountain structures, different climate, no buildings, no more people. Everywhere, that solemn reminder of the seriousness of sin, as well as an excitement to come out. For Noah and his family, the trial that they've been going through has come to an end. The trial of being around on an earth where there was just terrible people around, evil personified all out there. They lived through that, lived through 100 years or so of building an ark and ridicule. He was a preacher of righteousness. He wouldn't have been popular. That has come to an end. God rescued them from those trials and has brought them safely to a new creation, a recreation, a new start. And God wants us to think about that and be encouraged. And I know that that's true because of what God inspired Peter, the Apostle Peter, to write in one of his letters. If you look with me, I know it's going to be small on the screen, but at 2 Peter 2, verse 4 to 9. And in order to understand what the point of Peter, what Peter's got to say is, I want us to look at what he ends with, and I'll read it to you. The reason I put it all on one screen is I want you to see the flow, even if you can't actually read all the words. So at the end of this section, in verse 9, Peter writes, "Then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials." So Peter's writing to Christians who are struggling, going through difficulties, going through persecutions, going through suffering, going through struggles, whatever the trial. Peter says, because of what I've written above, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials. And Peter could have just stated that as a fact, and we should believe it. But he wants to embed it in Old Testament stories and Old Testament truths to point out to us some of the places where God did rescue. So in the 5 verses before, Peter writes about 4 events, and he says things like, "For if God did not do this, if he did not, if by doing this, if he rescued this," get the point, if he has done all these things, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials. So I'll read it to you so you can just see the type of thing. If you can't see the screen, it's fine. "For if God did not spare angels when they sinned, but cast them into hell and committed them to chains of gloomy darkness to be kept until the judgment, if he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the ungodly, if by turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes he condemned them to extinction, making them an example of what is going to happen to the ungodly, and if he rescued the righteous Lot, greatly distressed by the sensual conduct of the wicked, for as that righteous man lived among them day after day, he was tormenting his righteous soul over their lawless deeds that he saw and heard. If God does all those things, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials." And if we were just to take the bits that are relevant to us today, verses 5 and 9, and put them together, we would have, "If he did not spare the ancient world, but preserved Noah, a herald of righteousness, with 7 others, when he brought a flood upon the world of the godly, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials." Because of what he did for Noah and his trials, we can know that God will know and rescue us from our trials. Because God did it then, we can be confident that he knows how to rescue us now. So what are your trials? What is it that you're going through? How are you being hurt or rejected? What illness do you have that's causing you a nightmare of an existence at the moment? Are you mocked or shunned or persecuted for what you believe? Has it felt that some of those things are a bit out of control at times? Maybe worried that God's forgotten you, or if he's not forgotten you, he's forgotten the trouble that you're in at least and going through. I'm sure it felt like that for Noah at times. Year after year walking with God in quite literally a sinful world. Have you felt that God has forgotten the trial that you're in? See, Noah was saved in the ark from God's judgment, but not fully rescued until he arrived in the new earth. He had different trials. He was rescued from one, but it was a bit of an ongoing saga, and then he comes out. And they didn't know how it was going to end. At times, they probably felt very alone and adrift. They knew God was with them. He'd rescued them, but now it's all gone silent. No land in sight. And we're told, Genesis 8, verse 1, "But God remembered Noah." Now, this doesn't mean that God was looking over the flooded world thinking, well, that's all sorted, I've done it, I've finished. Now, what else was I doing? Something else was going. Noah! That's not the point. That's not what God's saying here. But God remembered Noah means God was mindful of Noah. God turned his focus back onto Noah and his situation because it was now the right time to focus again on sorting the next bit out for Noah. And what we see immediately, that it says God remembers Noah and then God acts. It's time to do something. My focus is back here because this is the right time for the next bit of action. And God makes a wind blow over the earth, which is the beginning steps of finishing the process of rescuing Noah. Remind you, God wants you to realize that if he did it for Noah and his family, he's able to rescue you. Now, from our position outside looking in, we can see how it all worked out. We look at Noah's story. We know what's going to happen. We can say, Noah, just wait, it'll be all right. Because we see the bigger picture. In our own situations, we're not outside of it. We're living through it. We're in the middle of it. But it's the same. God knows what he's doing in your life, in your trials. But I want you to consider a really important question. What does it mean to be rescued from trials? It's one thing to say God rescues us from our trials, but what does it mean to be rescued from trials? If we declare God knows how to rescue me, what should that look like in my situation? I think there are 3 different ways of being rescued from trials. And we see all 3 of them nicely illustrated in Noah, in the life of Noah and his family. So I'm going to use that, but also as well as using that, I want us to think about another example, which is that of having a picnic. And we'll begin there. You arrive somewhere beautiful. It's a lovely sunny day. There's only a small breeze blowing. The air is warm. You find that perfect spot for a picnic. You spread out all the delicious food in front of you, and you're just about to take a bite of your favourite jam and cream scone when 5 wasps arrive on the scene. They start buzzing around your hand with their eyes on the prize. How does God rescue? So we'll look at Noah and we'll look at our picnic. The first thing God rescues by, he rescues by removing the cause of the trial from me. Whatever our trial is, this is the one we tend to focus on. We want the problem to go. We want the thing that's causing the issue to go away. No more illness, persecutors to stop, the bully to move away, the cause of the sadness to end. Whatever is causing the trial, we want it to stop. So in Noah's story, removing the cause of his trial was removing all the people that were causing him problems. They were giving him a hard time. Now they're all gone. In our picnic story, it's wanting the wasps to suddenly drop dead. Or maybe if you're feeling kinder to the wasps but not so kind to someone else, it's hoping they'll smell something nicer on the picnic table over there so that they move on, so they're not there. If God removes the cause of the trial, that's what we want. We want God to remove the cause of the trial so my life can carry on without it. And that's the most obvious form of rescue from trial, and that's the one we tend to focus on and think that's the only one. But there's another 2 ways that God can rescue from trials. So the first one, God rescues me by removing the cause of the trial from me. And the second one is God removes me from the trial. It's the other way round, and takes me to a better place where there is no trial. See, the certainty of anyone who's a follower of Jesus is that one day, as we've been singing about, our trials will end because we'll go to be with Jesus. You will be rescued and taken somewhere where there is no more tears, no more suffering, no more pain, no more sadness. And God will take you somewhere better than this. Because this new creation, this wonderful thing in the future is genuine, it's real, it's for all of us that follow Jesus, a new creation where we'll live forever with God. In Noah's story, that's where we've kind of just finished, where we've got to in our Bible reading. He's been rescued from his trial and he's arrived at a new creation. In our picnic story, it would be being rescued from those 5 pesky wasps by suddenly having a heart attack and dying. So you switch from your picnic to the marriage of the Lamb. The banquet feast. You swap feasts. You swap events. And I can guarantee you, or I pretty much hope, that there'll be no stinging wasps at the banquet feast. We are taken somewhere better. It's a very drastic form of rescue for those left behind, but not for you. It's hard for who's remaining. But for you as a Christian, it's far better. You have been rescued. You will have no doubt that you are rescued when you arrive. So the first one is God rescues me by removing the cause of the trial. The second one is God rescues me by removing me from the trial. And the third one is that God rescues me by making the fruit sweeter than the sting. If I said to you, give me £5,000 at the end of this week, you'd feel that was a big sting, a big loss. But if I said to you, give me £5,000 at the end of this week, and for every £10 note you put in my hand, I'll put 50 in yours, would you still feel the loss? You'd hand me 5,000, but you'd get 25,000 back. We wouldn't feel the loss then. We'd feel a gain. We'd still be handing something over, but we would feel the gain. The question is, what else would you consider gain if it wasn't money that I was giving you? See, when the fruit of the trial is sweeter than the loss caused by the trial, the sting of the trial is taken away because we gain more than we lose. I'll just say that again. When the fruit of the trial is sweeter than the loss caused by the trial, the sting of the trial is taken away because we gain more than we lose. So in Noah's story, this is illustrated, well, in the midst of the trial, he's able to float above the horror of the trial all around. In our picnic story, it's the discovery that these 5 angry wasps circling your jam and cream scone are on, when you look more closely, actually dropping little dissolving sacks of the most beautiful honey on your scone as they pass. And you begin to wonder whether they're actually hoverflies without a sting after all. Another way of thinking of trials is that they're a bit like a trampoline. It takes going down in the trial to spring higher in spiritual growth. A heavier load can bring you higher. The more water Noah experienced, the higher he floated. Now, I want to mention a few different ways how it's possible for the fruit of a trial to be sweeter than the loss. The loss is still there. You still had to give me the £5,000. I'm not saying the loss isn't there and not real. It is genuine, it is trial, it is hard. But some ways that there can be something that's sweeter than the loss. And sometimes these 4 things come together. And it's one of the ways that a believer is rescued without the trial being removed. The first one I've got is a trial can bring me closer to God. A trial can make my relationship with him more real, more precious, more regular, more close. Because my trial causes me to talk to him more, to read his word more, to desire to understand him more, to turn to him more, to desire his presence and influence in my life more. It can shift my priorities. One of the kings said this, "We do not know what to do, but our eyes are on you." Ever felt that in a trial? See, growing closer to God and more dependent on him is actually a sweet fruit from a trial. The second one, a trial can make me more appreciative of Jesus and have a greater understanding of some of the pains and sufferings and hardships and trials that he was prepared to go through for me. And being grateful for his life and that he gave up perfect life, wonderful, no troubles, to come and experience and be with us on earth, and his death, of course. What he went through And I can gain a greater gratitude and a deeper appreciation and a deeper worship out of a trial sometimes. And that can be a sweet fruit in a trial. The third thing, a trial can enable me to learn to have more love and compassion for others in God's family who are also suffering. The Bible talks about how we comfort others with the comfort that we have received ourselves from God. Having greater love and understanding and compassion for one another is a sweet fruit from a tough trial. And the fourth and final one I've made a note of is a trial can remind me that earth isn't really my home. It can increase my desire for and focus on my spiritual, real home where I'm going to be forever. In loneliness, I realize how much I want God's presence face to face. Tears stir my heart for a place where there's no crying and no pain. A sick body makes me desire a new body, a new resurrected body. And the death of a loved one can make me long for the resurrection. Remembering to live that this earth isn't all it's about. To live for eternal things is a sweet fruit from a trial. And all of these different ways are ways to be rescued from trials while still being surrounded by the trial. To be like Noah, surrounded by the waters but floating above the waters until we arrive at the new creation. See, if the Lord rescued Noah, then the Lord knows how to rescue you in your trials. And we can rest and trust and be certain that God knows the best way to rescue each of us from each and every different trial we face. And he'll do it in different ways. And sometimes it'll be one for a while and then another way. He knows what is best for each. He knows what's best for me. He knows what's best now and at each and every moment of every day. Which kind of rescue will be best for you? See, God remembered Noah, and he did the perfect thing at the perfect time to rescue him. And God remembers you and will do the same. Let's pray. Lord, I want to be the first to admit that really the rescue I'm mainly interested in is the first one, where you just take away the problem. But Lord, I do trust you. We trust you. And we know that there are different ways that you can rescue us from the sting of a trial. By taking the trial away, by taking us away, or by giving us a sweeter benefit that's actually more precious, even though the trial is hard. Lord, help us to see your hand at work in our lives, to be aware of it and not feel that you've walked away from us. Because that's not true. You never walk away from us. And we thank you for that. But Lord, we know trials are really hard. They come in many forms. And Lord, whichever way you want to rescue each of us, we ask, Lord, that we would see your hand at work and have confidence. Amen.